Hello, everybody. My name is Kim Curley, and I lead the Workforce Readiness Consulting practice for NTT Data. And I am absolutely thrilled to be here today because I get to interview an expert in his field. And I'm thrilled because I think you will all get a lot out of our conversation today. So Palmer, who is an expert in his field, please tell us who you are, what city you're in, and how long you've worked for NTT Data.
Thanks, Kim. My name is Palmer. I've been with NTT for about a year now in their New York office in their healthcare practice. And I am the expert today to talk about Gen Z in the workforce. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
That's great. Thank you. So a little bit about why I think this conversation is so important. The conversation is so important is because Gen Z in the workplace is, frankly, that's where we are. We're actually starting to be on the cusp of even other generations being in the workplace today. And what we do know is that there are generational differences in mindset differences between all of the great population that's in the workforce today. I happen to be a Gen Xer, so it's, I have my own sort of special approach to how I work and how I come to the workplace, but I'm really excited to hear and learn from you. So I'm going to kick off with some questions and we'll see where the conversation goes. Does that work for you, Palmer?
Sounds good. Let's go.
Okay, great. So my first question for you is, since you've joined NTT Data, what have leaders done to really get you motivated and keep you engaged in your work?
One of the best things that NTT has done is provide info sessions with leaders who present to the new hires that come in, and they're open to everyone. And it really gives an opportunity for anyone to look at what industries we work in, previous success stories, and also opens up the opportunity for us to reach out to them. So oftentimes it's difficulty in figuring out, who do I talk to get the information I want or the expertise that I need or just the advice when I'm starting a career. And so having those info sessions available and then being able to say, okay, Kim Curley is in charge of the workforce readiness practice, and she has a bunch of expertise in that field, and I'm interested in it. I know that you're the person that I can email, and you'll either point me in the right direction. And a lot of leaders have also been gracious enough to spend their time. So I've had the opportunity, and a lot of my friends have here, to talk one-on-one with leadership after those info sessions where we say, hey, I'm interested, and they'll block out some time on their calendars, which is great.
That's awesome. Is there any area that you see for potential extra improvement? Like, what else can we be doing to make sure you're motivated and engaged?
I think the only thing that I can think of on that front would be some sort of a formalized version of progress. So I know that there's promotions periodically, and those tend to happen, somewhere between 3 to 5 years. But something in between there, or just a periodic little badge, something that notes the successes that we've had on a shorter term scale, can be motivational, right? Something that we can work to achieve. But then also it's great for us to market ourselves and for us to be proud of what we've done and to push that out on social media sites or to other people in the company and get us all kind of a little competitive in that sense.
Great idea. All right, so we're going to take that back and work on that, see if there's something we can do there. Okay, second question. What makes you feel most engaged? Like, when do you really sort of get jazzed about the work that you're working on?
I get really excited about work when I understand the bigger picture of what's going on. So whether it's, and when I say bigger picture, I mean really the large end goal, right? So if it's a project, like I do a lot of healthcare work now, right? And that end goal is usually pretty explicit. It's about improving the care that you're giving patients. And that might be in a revenue cycle part of that, or I might be on an IT desk. But at the end of the day, that's the goal, and that's the end movement. And I think also even a little bit drilling down a little bit closer to a shorter term goal is good, but the bigger picture really gets me going, okay, that's where we're trying to reach, and then all of my deliverables and all of the things that I'm working on fit that, right? So now I know, okay, that's really the end goal, and I don't need to worry too much about, say, this presentation because it's more internal and more of a checkup, but this is the one that really is going to push change in an environment. And so I think those are the things that really get me motivated, right? As I think about those bigger pictures, and I want to make an impact towards whatever that end goal is.
Yeah, and working in the healthcare space, that gives you a greater why or a greater purpose kind of right off the bat. I mean, one of the jokes that my husband and I have when we have a bad day at the office is, well, it's not brain surgery. But when you're working in the healthcare space, it might be brain surgery. So it's really important to think about that larger why. What are you doing? So I love that you've tapped into that and really feel that.
Absolutely. And I think it works too in the other industries, though. I mean, banking and finances, especially now with the markets and things, I mean, it affects people's lives on a day to day. It affects businesses. There's manufacturing and supply chain, right? Those do affect people at the end of the day, and they do have bigger purposes too. All of it does.
You're so right. You're so right. I need to quote you next time one of my friends says, "Wait, you're in the corporate world?" But yeah, you're right. There is always a greater why, that's for sure. So I'm going to switch gears and talk a little bit about being remote and being in person. So how do you and your peers generally feel about going into the office?
Um, my peers and I tend to enjoy the flexibility of going in, of going in and not going in. So those opportunities where we can kind of choose what works best for our style. So I know for me, I'm extroverted and I like going to the office. I like being around people. I work better in those spaces. But I know a lot of my friends and peers are more introverted and prefer to do a lot of their work on their own, and they're more productive in that space. And so allowing people to be in the spaces that they work the best is important. But I do know most of my peers want to be in the office in some facet because you make those connections, you network, you
Mhm.
get to see leadership, you get to watch what they do, and get to follow that and really learn from them. So I think flexibility, understanding what type of work people are doing as well, if it's more technical or if it's filling out forms and responding to emails, that's not a task that needs to be done in an
Mhm.
office. But if it's collaboration, if we're coming up with ideas, or if we're trying to make a connection with a client, those work much better in person. So I think just being flexible. Some days go in, some days not.
Yeah, yeah, I think you're spot on about that. I preach flexibility to all of our clients because there is work that benefits greatly from people being together. So I think that's good. So I heard number one point is flexibility. Number two point is aligning it to what you're doing and the need to be in. I would also imagine, for people who are just 1 year into your career, you've never worked in an office. I mean, most of you and your peers have never worked in an office. So I would imagine there's some aspect of curiosity or wonder about that too, just because it hasn't been a norm. You may have had a similar or a parallel experience in college, for example, but certainly not in the last several years.
Right. No, that's true. And I think that is a huge plus of being in the office. And I think something that, yeah, I know a lot of us have talked on, a lot of my peers and I have talked on the side, you know, is it okay if we step away from the computer to get a drink of water? Is it okay if we do this? And once you're in the office and you can kind of see like, oh, okay, someone gets up to go get a drink periodically. You can go take a walk if you need to get a breather. Can you go out to lunch? I mean, if it's not a busy day and you have the time, people in the office go out to lunch together all the time. So you
Mhm.
start realizing this is how the workday flows, which you definitely don't get from a virtual experience. So I think definitely impactful, at least for me, going into the office as a young professional.
That's good because you're sort of learning what normal might, quote unquote, normal, or the old normal perhaps might look like.
Right.
And I was gonna ask you, how is it different starting your career remotely versus starting in person? But you don't know because you've only started remotely. Do you have friends who, or peers who are in circumstances where they have, from the get-go have started directly into, in-person work?
I have a few peers who have, and it seems again, style is really important. My friends who are extroverted, they love it. They're really excited to go
Yeah.
back. And friends who are more introverted tend to be a little bit, wish they were in a job where they could be a little bit more virtual.
Mhm.
And so again, that going back to flexibility, I think the people that I find to be the most happy and satisfied are the ones that go, hey, it's either, certain optional days, or they go in a certain amount of days of the week, or they plan with the partners that they need to work with when they go in. And they tend to go, I get that in-person experience. I get to see what other people are doing, but I still have that virtual. So definitely different. But I think, and there's benefits and negatives, right, to both, right? So that
Mhm.
balance is what's key. But I definitely think starting in some facet in person, or having some sort of in-person experience for a young professional is key.
Yeah, the consulting business in particular, lots of people refer to it as an apprentice-like business. So there are lots of skills that you learn by doing specific tasks or things. And you said this a minute ago, Palmer. There's certain things you learn by watching those who have 20 years in their career. How do they navigate a particular sticky situation with a client, or what's appropriate behavior in front of a client or not, or how relaxed can you be? Is it okay to go up, get up and get a drink of water? That's one of the things I know I miss, and some of my peers miss, is that ability to be shoulder to shoulder and elbow to elbow, or maybe elbow plus 6 feet to elbow, with some of the folks who've joined, recently in the organization, to help you learn the things that maybe we learned the hard way. We certainly don't want you to have to learn it the hard way, so we'd love to pass it along. We're looking forward to the time where we can spend more time together in the office. Not just your generation, my generation's looking forward to that as well.
Right. And I think that's important. And that's another, I know, even from some leadership that I've talked to, that you get into a different, pattern of life, right? It's been over a year since we've been doing virtual things. And so whether it's, picking up the kids from school, or not having that commute in the mornings and the afternoons can sometimes be nice. And so figuring out ways to incentivize, leaders to be back in the office so that we, young professionals can learn, because it needs to be both for that to really be beneficial.
Absolutely. I think we're back to that flexibility word, aren't we? What works best for individuals is what works best for individuals, as opposed to a blanket rule.
Yeah, I think anybody taking notes right now, if they haven't written down flexibility, they really missed something.
That's one where the professor says, underline this word, flexibility.
Right, it'll be on the test. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. So I know you've only been in your career, or in your career with NTT Data, for a year. What do you think in what area have you experienced your greatest growth? What would you say?
I think my greatest growth has come in the engagement I'm currently on. There was a leadership change in the middle of that engagement. So I started with a great leader who was introducing me to the client project and was onboarding me. And then about halfway through the engagement, we switched out and had new leadership come in. And so there's a little bit of obviously a learning curve for the new leader who came in. Where are we right now in terms of the project? What direction are we headed in? But then also difference in leadership style that I had to adjust to.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, for initially there was a little bit of a communication breakdown, and we set some periodic meetings and we established, okay, what does work look like for you? What direction do you want to head in? So that when we get into meetings and we're talking with clients, we're on the same page. It ended up being a great experience for me, both because I learned about those different leadership styles and how I can fit within one leader, and how I can put myself in a position to be led well. But it also was really helpful in that leader expected more out of me and expected more out of our team. And we got more autonomy from the other people that I worked with in order to create deliverables or to push directions in ways we thought they would be beneficial for the client. And that ended up being really cool for me. I got to present some things to the client. I got to work on some things and really own them. And I don't think I would have had that without, that shift. So both leaders were great. I needed both, but that was a huge growth opportunity that I got to take advantage of. And I highly recommend any young professionals, if you get the chance to take on a little bit extra role or responsibility, just jump at it. It's great, and I've learned so much from it.
Good. Oh, I love that. Because that's actually one of the pieces of advice I give when I'm asked is, what should I tell people early in their career? And I always say, do more than you have been asked. So if you're asked to answer one single question, answer the questions that might show up around that question. Take it to the next step so that you're really adding your own brand of added value to whatever that assignment is. I love that. That's fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about skills. So what is, let's call it maybe your favorite skill that you have developed in the workforce? So first tell me that part, and then I've got a follow-up to that.
My favorite skill. Like I mentioned, I'm an extrovert. My favorite skill so far has been figuring out ways in which to build connections with people in work. And a lot of it comes from interest outside of it. I think which is really interesting. So many people, when they focus on networking, it's about what skill do I want to learn, what industry I want to be in, and that's important, and you should have that background and that knowledge and go for it. But it's also things like, when we're interested in the same music, or we like to do things outside of the office, or even just taking the time to listen to someone else's interest, can make a huge difference in making connections with people, and those people connections are what ends up getting you the skills or into the industry that you want to grow in. And so for me, I've used networking is making friends, and that's been the most fun skill for me, is getting better at making friends in an office space, in a workspace.
Now, did you did you show up in the workplace with that skill? Have you always been pretty good at networking, like when you were in college or, before you joined the workforce? Or is that a new skill for you?
That was something I definitely have a natural inclination for it. Definitely, again, I'm a social person, but though each environment you're in is a little bit different. So another skill that I have worked on a lot is writing, and I've written stuff for a political journal in school. Obviously, done academic papers. Business writing's a little different, and so while I enjoy that skill, the first time I wrote an article didn't go so well, and I had a bunch of markups and things I needed to work on. And same thing, right, in the office space when it comes to making friends. I am social. I know I do have that skill, but it's a little bit different virtually, right, on Zoom calls, and client versus internal people, and everybody's different. So it's been a slight adjustment, but I definitely did have an inclination for it
That's
previously.
good. That's good. It's a tough one, I think. Particularly, and I'm an extrovert as well. I find it difficult. I find that unless I attach purpose to networking, it feels hollow to me. So I always have to sort of psych myself up and think about, okay, for what reason am I doing this? What am I offering to the people that I want to meet and get connected with? And that has helped me, instead of thinking about it in sort of the old terms of how many business cards can I get, right? Like, so that's what we used to think about in large networking. So having that purpose, or what can I give, helps it not feel so difficult for me, I think.
Right, now it's LinkedIn connections, but
Yeah, there you
the
go.
same model.
Exactly. Exactly. In fact, I used business cards for the first time in years over the summer. It was really interesting that I actually used a business card. It's fascinating. All right, so let's skip. Speaking of things that maybe didn't exist or do not exist today that did exist in previous generations, can you think about opportunities to learn or grow that you have had because of the generation you're in that maybe I didn't have because of the generation that I'm in?
I think one of the big things that I've heard from people who've worked before me for a while now is the information access. And we hear about it all the time. There's so much information now than ever was previously. Something that's really cool, I think, for my generation is the fact that not only is there so much information that we can grasp very easily, it's in so many different formats, whether it's you want to read an article, or it's in a podcast form, or it's a video. And so everyone has different learning styles. And so some people prefer reading, some people prefer audio, prefer visual. And so we have the opportunity to learn so much information because it's all right there, but in the way that fits best for us.
Hmm.
And so I think there's less of a value in having information, I think, as an individual. There's very few things that I can go out and find and learn or grasp that other people can't because it's all accessible. But I can figure out how to retain and learn more of it in the way that fits me best. And so the growth opportunity there, the amount of information that I can learn and retain and put to use is so much greater. So I think figuring out, I know the ways that I learn best, but figuring out the ways in which each of us learn best at the beginning of a career, and then and using those, leveraging, that self-knowledge is a way in which you can, I think, go really far, really fast.
That is fantastic. Absolutely. So what is the way that you take in? Are you a reader? Are you a podcaster? Are you a video watcher? What's your jam in terms of modalities?
I actually have recently found the term for it, aphantasia. So I don't have visual memory.
Ah,
Or I can't recall, at least. So I remember, but I don't recall it very easily. So I'm more of listening and reading. So I read a lot of articles, and even on Zoom calls, or even I do like the videos because people speak, and so audio works really well for me.
mhm.
But visually looking at it face to face doesn't always work. Although I try my best because it's good to be engaged in that way. But that's what works for me. So I know to use those resources.
That's great. Any particular favorite things to listen to or read in the business space for you right now? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Um, Becker is a healthcare like journal
Hmm.
website that has some really great resources. And then oftentimes I'm following leaders on LinkedIn, and what the articles that they're reposting, the articles
Hmm.
that they're looking at are the same ones that I read. I go, okay, you know, I can search through the Wall Street Journal and read a bunch of different articles, but in order to parse out which ones are the ones that are important for me and important for business and for NTT specifically, following those leaders and then looking at what are you reading and what are you sharing is where I usually go.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Okay, I've got one last question for you. And this one is there a challenge that you face at work that you think is unique to you as a young professional?
I think something that's unique is the kind of how we talked about the saturation of information right now. There's uh, so many people who are branding and marketing, and there's so much access to people and being able to stand out. So at one point it was, if you delivered, I think, really quality work in a small team, you would stand out. But now with LinkedIn, I mean, everybody's got different accolades and awards, and people are constantly doing things. And so figuring out ways in which, how do you stand out, and then how do you do that virtually, right? So if we're not in the office, if I'm not shaking hands, if I'm not being able to turn in my deliverable directly to a person so they know it came from me, what am I doing to make sure that the work that I'm getting is acknowledged? And how am I making sure that I'm in position, so that my name comes up when there's something to be done or when there's a new opportunity. So I think that's a challenge. I would love to hear if you had any opinions on the solutions to that challenge.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you how you do it because I find that problem myself as well. So, I'm a leader of a group. There's lots of leaders of a group. How do I stand out from amongst my peers? And I'm not a social media native kind of gal, right? Like, I'm still figuring out the better ways to do that, which is one of the ways that you do. I think that we do most of our sort of peer competitive actions in the workplace. A lot of that boils down to how active are you on certain social media platforms and what are you posting and who's liking that information. So I'm still kind of learning how to navigate through that as well. But you're right, finding a way to stand out, I think, is difficult. The one thing I would tell you is that I spent you probably won't have this problem, but I spent a good chunk of time early in my career doing what I call trying on different outfits. So there's a leader, and let me try on that leader's outfit. And does it fit me? Can I lead in that style? Can I adopt that style? And I tried on, a bunch of different outfits. Those were in the days where there was, a leadership book every 6 months that you were supposed to learn from, as opposed to every 6 minutes that you needed to learn from. And so I tried on a lot of those different outfits and they didn't fit. The thing that worked best for me, both in terms of success in my career and I believe success in standing out, whether that's to my peers or upwards to my bosses or to the teams that I lead and work with, is my own unique style. I've found that it is in fact unique, and it's okay. And that was a great learning experience for me, and I think one that makes me feel like I stand out, even though I realize there's sort of a sea of things that make me maybe not stand out so much in the larger world. I still feel like I'm unique and I stand out.
Good to know. I'll be true to myself as I go
There you
forward
go.
out there.
Yeah. Find
Absolutely.
your North Star and stick to it, right?
I appreciate it.
Okay. Well, Palmer, that's all the questions that I have for you. I'm wondering if you have any questions for me today.
You did answer one of my questions was going to be if you could give any advice, what would it be? But you've given a lot already. So another question I do have is, like you mentioned, I mean, Gen Z has been entering the workforce now for the last few years, and eventually we'll be transitioning into the next workforce. But what have you noticed in terms of the people that you're leading and any of the new hires that you've interacted with? What are the differences that you've seen between young people in the workforce right now and when you entered?
Oh, great question. And I actually talk about this a lot. So the work that I do is around the human side of business. So I am often advising clients on this very subject, and there's a couple of clients that we've been advising on this topic recently. I think one of the biggest changes that I see, and this has happened not only with the entrance of new generations into the workforce, but also with this great resignation, great reshuffle that we're going through, is that the power has shifted. When I entered the workforce, you were lucky to get a job. your employer had all of the power. They set the rules. They told you how things were going to be, and you showed up and you put on your suit and your little fluffy bow tie thing, because I'm old enough to know what those are. And you went to work and you abided by the rules that were established by the company. But today, I think that power dynamic has completely flipped. Today, the workforce demands and employers have to deliver. So the workforce demands that F word we talked about, flexibility, right? The workforce demands flexibility in where you work, in when you work, in exactly how you work. The workforce demands better attention to health and wellness of the workforce. The workforce demands more attention to diversity and inclusion and belonging. The workforce has demanded, and the employers now need to respond if they want to attract and retain the best talent that there is. And certainly if they want to attract the talent that's just coming out of college and just starting out in their careers. They've never experienced a situation where the employer had as much of a power differential. So it's really interesting to me, and I think that's one of the biggest differences. There are things that you may ask for in the workplace that I would never have thought to ask for. It would have been, too scary and, just blasphemy that I would ask for something like that. And I'm thrilled that has completely changed. Sometimes it knocks me off balance because I'm learning a different world, just like we all are every day. But I'm thrilled to pieces that has changed. But that's what I would say is probably the most notable difference for me.
Absolutely. Well, I asked for ice cream in the office at one point. I don't think they obliged, but I do feel that difference. So
You're working on it, right?
thank you so much for taking your time to spend with me today. I know you're the VP, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, but in this scenario, I'm not. I'm the one learning from you. So, Palmer, thank you so much for the time. I know that all of our watchers and listeners have gotten a lot out of this conversation thanks to you. So, I really appreciate it, and I hope we can do it again.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, everyone. High five, Palmer.